All right. In this video, I want to talk about how the true Jew actually represents the man and woman, while the Gentile actually represents the animal, the beast. And I want to show you this through the Bible. That's going to be the main subject of this video. But there's a few things I want to say before I get into it, because a lot of this stuff is going to be a bit controversial to people and even deemed to be racist. But the truth is the truth, and we need to accept the truth even if we don't like it. And we may need to eat some humble pie and accept this. But yeah, with that being said, we can learn spiritual things from physical things, right? When we look at the relationship between a man and a woman, we can see that the man represents the spiritual and the woman represents the physical, right? And you may be asking how. Well, you see, the flesh actually houses the spirit. So the spirit goes into the flesh, just as a man goes into the woman, right? That's why we always call a ship that the sailors go on a she. We always call whatever lets us go into it and travel in a her, a she, right? Because it's always the female that brings something in, and it's always the male that goes in, right? So we learn that lesson from the relationship between a male and a female. We learn the relationship between the spiritual world and the physical world, right? And just to give a brief foundation of that, because what I'm going to be talking about here is going to help us understand spiritual things. You see, the true Jews, Israel, were supposed to be a light unto the world. It was supposed to be a representation of the spiritual world, what was going on in heaven with the Father, the Son, and the angels. And the Gentiles represent the whole world, including the Jews, where we're supposed to learn from that to see what's going on in the spiritual world so that we can understand what's God doing, right? So keep that in mind as I talk about this. You see, God created man from the dust of the earth, and he created them, man and woman. And what happened in the Garden of Eden? Well, Eve did something weird with a serpent, a beast, an animal. And she conceived, and then she had sexual relations with her husband Adam, and she conceived, and she ended up giving birth to twins, Cain and Abel. And Cain is referred to as the son of Satan, the offspring of Satan. And there's a reason for that, because something weird happened there. God even said that the woman's seed is going to be at enmity or at war, at odds with the seed of the serpent, because there is something going on there. And with the Jews, you're a Jew dependent on your mother, not because of your father. And I'm going to explain why, showing you this Rh negative and Rh positive blood types. The true Jew is Rh negative. The Gentiles are Rh positive. And the half-Jews they would show up on the blood type as Rh positive, but they would be half and half. Right? Because if you have AB, you get A from the father, B from the mother. Well, you might be A negative and B positive, and on the blood type, it's going to show you're positive. But you could still pass on your A negative trait to someone else, and the father or mother can do the same, and you would have an Rh negative child, even though you have positive blood. The same thing if you're one of these single letters here, because you could be A positive, but you have an A negative from the mother or father, and then you have A positive from the mother or father. But if one of your blood types from your parents is positive, then you're going to show up positive, right? But anyway, if a male with Rh negative blood impregnates a woman with Rh positive blood, they will have a child with no problem. There's not going to be an issue, right? So if a Jewish father has a child with a Gentile woman, they don't consider that child a Jew because of the mother. And here's why. Because if you have an Rh positive father with an Rh negative woman, the Rh negative woman will abort the child. She might be able to have one child with that father, and there's a chance that it could be deformed or defective in some way. But sometimes they'll be able to have a child. But then after that, she will abort all the children because her body fights it off as if it's something foreign. And it's just as God said that her seed will have enmity with his seed, and they won't mix, as the iron won't mix with clay, which is what we're going to get into here. You can see is that Adam and Eve are made of the earth, the Jew, while these Rh positive, which is the rhesus gene or the rhesus antigen, comes from the rhesus monkey. That's where they named it from. It's from a beast. And this would be the iron and the clay. They don't mix, right? So now I'm going to get into the scriptures and break this down. Now, after this, setting this little foundation here. In Daniel chapter 2, we read about a statue with a head of gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of brass, and its legs of iron, and its feet of iron mixed with clay. And as Daniel's given the interpretation of the feet of iron and clay, he says here at verse 43, "And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay," which is dirty clay, "they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay." So here we see that the iron is trying to mix with the seed of men. What's going on here? Well, I'm going to explain that here, but first I'm going to show you what the clay represents. Over here in Jeremiah chapter 18, and at verse 5, right after God tells Jeremiah to go to a potter's house, and he wants him to learn about pottery and with clay, and he says here at verse 5, "The word of the Lord came to me, saying, O house of Israel, cannot I do with you as this potter, saith the Lord? Behold, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so are ye in my hand, O house of Israel." And you'll see this connection every so often in the book of Jeremiah, referring to the Jews as clay. And over here in Isaiah, you'll see a few references as well. I'm just picking up one here from Isaiah 29, verse 16. It says, "Surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay, for shall the work say of him that made it, he made me not? Or shall the thing framed say to him that framed it, he had no understanding?" So this is basically God saying, yeah, I formed you out of clay, and what, you're going to tell me I didn't do it now? I made you. It's like you making a house or a painting, and the painting saying you didn't do it, right? Or you make an AI robot, and the AI robot says, no, I made myself. You didn't do it, right? That's basically what God's saying to us with this little passage here. So this clay represents God's people. Adam and Eve, made of the earth, the true Jew. The iron represents the Gentile kingdom. You see, all these kingdoms here represent the Gentile kingdoms. You got the head of gold representing Babylon. You get the chest and arms of silver representing Medo-Persia. You get the belly and thighs of brass representing Greece. You get the legs of iron representing Rome. And then you have the feet of iron and clay, which is Rome and the world trying to mix with God's people. So you'd say the Judo-Christians, right? But it also has to tie into what I was showing here, the blood type. Because you see that in Revelation chapter 7, we're told about these kingdoms again, but they're referred to as beasts. So when you think about this iron mixing with clay, you can see that this beast is trying to mix with God's people. As we see here in Daniel chapter 7, we read about the head of gold being a lion, the chest and arms of silver being a bear, the belly and thighs of brass being a leopard, and the legs of iron being this indescript beast that seems kind of dragon-like, some kind of serpent-like weird creature. But over here, we can see how this lion representing Babylon also represents Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. As it says here in verse 4, the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings, and I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And this is what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He's a beast because he's a Gentile, and he was humbled by God. For 7 years he went insane and thought he was an ox and ate grass out in the field. But after 7 years, he came to, and God gave him his sanity back, and he ended up blessing God and exalting God. So you can see how the lion was lifted up on his feet to be like a man, and the beast heart removed, and he was given the heart of a man. You could say the beast was made into a Jew, right? He converted. Something inwardly happened to Nebuchadnezzar, just like being born again, right? That's pretty much what happened to this fella. And so we can see here that when we come down to this last beast here, that this indescribed beast is going to be the same as what we saw here in Daniel chapter 2, this iron kingdom trying to mix with the seed of men. Isn't that interesting? The seed of men. That's referring to the true Jews, men and women. And I'm gonna break this down a bit more for you here. We're gonna go to Revelation chapter 12, and we read about a woman trying to be devoured along with her child by a dragon. So we're looking at the beast representing the Gentile kingdoms, right? Well, this is a woman. This is not an animal. That's not a beast. It's a woman. This represents God's people. This woman right here actually represents Israel. They have in the crown of 12 stars being the 12 tribes of Israel. And in a sense, it also represents personified in Mary, who was the virgin that gave birth to Jesus. Mary represents Israel as a nation. And when we jump over to where I got it right here, Revelation chapter 17, there's a woman that rides the beast. And this woman is a harlot. So you notice that this woman is not a beast. Again, it's a woman. Right? It's of mankind. It's not an animal. But it's riding the animal. Right? But she's a harlot. And why it's called Babylon is because Babylon means confusion. And as we read in Leviticus, if a woman is to lie with a beast, as if she's lying with a man sexually, that is confusion. Right? So she's mingling with this beast, which is what we read about going on with Daniel. The iron, which represents this indescribed beast here in Daniel chapter 7 with 7 heads and 10 horns, like it says here, is going to try to mingle with the seed of men. And how is it doing it? With this harlot. Oops, I went to the wrong one over here. The harlot over here. And that's why it's Babylon, because it's confusion. Right? It's the church mingling with the state. Is another metaphor for it. The church being the woman, the state being the beast. The nation that's described as a beast. She's mingling with it, mixing with it. Right? But there's more to it. There's something going on individually with the blood. That I can't quite put together other than it has something to do with the Rh negative and the Rh positive. Trying to mix and mingle together. But anyway, Um, one of the things it says about this woman is how she sitteth upon many waters over here at verse 1, right at the end of the verse 1. The great whore that sitteth upon many waters. So she's a whore, which showing that she's basically she's Israel, she's Jerusalem, as described in Ezekiel chapter 16, where she's in a covenant with God, but she's going after other gods. She's committing adultery. And not only is she committing adultery, she's committing adultery with a beast, an animal. Right? And when we come down here, it actually tells us what the waters are. In the verse 15 it says, And he saith unto me, The waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Something to keep in mind when we come over to Revelation chapter 7. We're backing up here. We read about 144,000 Jews who are sealed from every tribe. I was wondering if there's anybody who's actually a true Jew by blood from these tribes. Is that possible that they exist? And it was like, they can. You see, like I was saying, is that even if you're Rh positive in your blood type, and even if your spouse or whoever you're having children with is Rh positive, you still may have a recessive negative gene. Because let's say you're both, you and your spouse, who you're mating with, because I know it's not always your spouse, is Rh positive. Well, you might, let's say you're A positive, both of you are A positive. You both might have an A negative recessive. And you may pass on A negative to your child. So your child would be A negative, even though you're both positive. The same thing if you're O, because you might have an O negative and an O positive. And so would your spouse, and you could pass on the negatives. Or you could be A positive and your spouse A B positive, but you have a recessive A negative and your spouse has a recessive B negative, and your child will come out possibly a B negative, because they would get your recessive A negative gene and your recessive B negative gene. And I'm only calling it recessive because whenever they do a blood test, if you have any bit of positive, they just label you as positive. And it's a good thing they do, because even though you have negative there, if they gave your blood to somebody who's O negative, it would kill you. It would kill them, I should say. Because you see, A negative, they can give their blood to positive and it's not a big deal. But if positive blood gives it to the A negative, it will kill them. So it's interesting how that works, right? It's the seed of man and the seed of Satan here. And if you're positive blood, you just need to eat some humble pie on that one, because I'm even going to show you what Jesus has to say about that. But yeah, so like we see here, these are probably Rh negative individuals all over the world that might not even realize that they're Jews, and they're going to be sealed. And then we have what it says here at verse 9. And after this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues. So we can see here, just like the woman is sitting upon all these different nations and languages here, because that's what tongues means, is different languages, all these different nations. There's a great multitude that are saved out of those. So we can see here that the Jews are separated from the Gentiles in this time that Revelation is speaking about. And if you're a Christian and you study the Bible, you know that in Jesus, there is no Jew or Gentile. In the Church of God, there is no Jew or Gentile. Both Jews and Gentiles come to Christ and they become one. But outside of the church, in the physical world, you have Jews and you have Gentiles. And these Jews are sealed and they're separated from the great multitude, even though the great multitude are saved as well. And that has to do with what's going on here. The woman would be a Jew, but she's an unsaved group of Jews sitting upon the unsaved world. While Revelation 7 is talking about a group of saved Jews with a large group of saved Gentiles. It's the same thing when we're looking at Revelation chapter 12, where we have the pure woman giving birth to the man-child. And then over in 17, we have the harlot, the impure woman. Right? So we see all these connections going on, right? And then I've already went over this part here about how the Gentiles are represented by beasts. And I'm going to show you how Jesus says this as well. You can also read this, like it says here in Matthew chapter 15, verses 21 through 28. But there's a woman who comes to Jesus looking to have her child healed because she's possessed with a devil. But the woman's not a Jew. And check out what Jesus has to say here. We start at verse 26, and it says, the woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by nation, and she besought him that he would cast the devil out of her daughter. But Jesus said unto her, let the child first be filled, for it is not meet that the children's bread should be cast I'm sorry, I misread that. But Jesus said unto her, let the children first be filled, for it is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it unto the dogs. So Jesus is referring to her, a Gentile, as a dog. She humbled herself and accepted that. And that's what we need to do as Gentiles, is to humble ourselves and accept that we're dogs and that we eat the crumbs. And Jesus had pity upon her and cast the devil out of her daughter. And it was interesting because I think if we go over here real quick, what is it, 21 through 28? The woman says something to him here. She calls him here. She says, have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. And the interesting thing is that the son of David is tied to the Jews, to Israel. So she cannot call on the king of the Jews. She's not a Jew, right? And then he tells her, I'm only sent out to the lost sheep of Israel. And he's like, I'm not going to cast their food to the dogs. And she leaves out, thou son of David, and she says, truth, Lord, yet dogs eat from the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Right? And then Jesus healed her, or cast the devil out of her daughter. But you see here how she leaves out son of David, because the Gentile world looks at Jesus as Lord and not the son of David. So you see a little bit of a difference there? So she needed to come to Jesus as a Gentile and not as a Jew, because she's not a Jew. As he says, I've come only for the lost sheep of Israel. He's like letting her know. And then when she comes to him as a Gentile, he helps her. So she had to humble herself. Right? And this showed this connection in the Old Testament. In Exodus 22, it says at verse 33, ye shall be holy men unto me, neither shall ye eat any flesh that is torn of beast in the field, ye shall cast it to the dogs. Right? And when we see the connection over here to Deuteronomy chapter 14 at verse 21, it says, ye shall not eat of anything that dieth of itself, thou shalt give it unto the stranger that is in thy gates, that he may eat it, or thou mayest sell it unto an alien, for thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God, thou shalt not seethe a kid in his mother's milk. So here it's saying how you're holy, just like over here, to give it to the dogs. Here it's saying, yeah, give it to the Gentiles. Somebody who's not a Jew. Because as a Jew, you're to be holy. But you can give it to the dogs, who are the Gentiles. Right? So that's why the Jews referred to the Gentiles as dogs and to pigs. Just as Daniel in Daniel 7 refers to the Gentile kingdoms as beasts. Because that's what they are. But something interesting happens. We have this beast that's talked about in Daniel chapter 7. The one that the whore is said to be riding on. The one with 7 heads and 10 horns. This beast comes up out of the sea. 7 heads, 10 horns, right? From Daniel chapter 7. And then we read about it again in Revelation chapter 17 with a horse sitting upon it. And another beast comes up. But you see how this beast comes up out of the sea? You notice that? And what have we already been reading here? That, where was it over here? The woman is sitting upon the many waters, the different nations. The sea represents the Gentiles, right? The woman is sitting upon the Gentiles, just as this beast comes up, this beast out of the sea is coming up among the Gentiles. The sea represents the Gentiles. But this is the seed of man that they're trying to mingle with. The beast is trying to mingle with the seed of man from the earth. You see this as the RH positive trying to mix with the RH negative. Just as you see it says, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth and had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So you see, this dragon-like beast is trying to mix and make a government, a kingdom that is lamb-like, Jesus-like, Christian-like, Israel-like. But it speaks like a dragon, like a wolf in sheep's clothing over here. This kingdom is a kingdom, it's like a lamb, but it's still a beast. Nonetheless, it's an animal. It's not a man, it's not a woman, it's still a beast. And this beast, it's more friendly than a lion, than a bear, than a leopard, than some weird dragon-like beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. It's a lot nicer. It's a lot more appealing. It's a lamb. A 2-horned lamb, but it speaks like a dragon. It speaks like it's a big mean beast. And this is the beast that gets everybody to worship the first beast, the Gentile beast, and to receive the mark, the 666 mark. It has to do with that star of Rephaim, known as the Star of David, that 6-pointed star, the Star of Rephaim, or Saturn, or just straight up Satan. It's the 666. You got your 6 sides with the hexagon in the middle, your 6 triangles, and then you got your 6-pointed star. The mark is tied to that star. But yeah, we see that this kingdom here is a Judeo-Christian kingdom. This is the 2 horns is America and Israel. America and Israel is going to be the one to actually impose the mark of the beast and to get everybody to worship the first beast. And I see the beast with the deadly wound as Israel is completely wiped out, and then it was restored. But then, right now, I just saw a depiction in my mind's eye here about Germany. Germany was destroyed in World War I, and it was restored and able to make war during World War II. And during World War II, they had the Jews take the mark, which was that Star of Rephaim, or what people call today the Star of David, which is not something that's in the Bible. And it was a Holocaust, right? A burnt offering. And I could see that actually happening in the future. Germany pops back up, and there's a lot of anti-Semitism because of the nation of Israel. And a lot of Jews speak out against Israel because they say, no, the Messiah is going to come and he's going to collect all the Jews around the world and bring us to Israel. It's not we ourselves to do it. And because we're doing this, we're creating anti-Semitism and resentment towards Jews, where the world is becoming more Nazi-ish in the sense of hating Jews. It's something that's growing. And you could see it actually happening before you know it. But anyway, that could explain why at the end, it has to do with the Jews, the 144,000 and the great multitude that actually support them. Those are the ones that are being martyred. But, yeah, that was the picture I wanted to point here, is the beasts represent the Gentile world. And the beast out of the sea represents coming out of all the Gentile nations. And out of the earth means this beast, the Gentiles are mixing with the Judeo-Christians, and they create a new government. And that's what we see with America and Israel going on. But it's speaking like a dragon. It's speaking just like the Gentile beasts, even though it's coming up as a lamb. Right? So we can see that picture being painted out. And then we come over here, just to add a little bit to it. You notice when it talks about the 144,000, it says they were redeemed from the earth. Right? So they come out of the earth. And you notice it says how they follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. And the counterfeit of that is the people who follow this Lamb, this government, and not God. They make government their God, and they follow this Lamb wherever it goes. And these ones are lost. It's a counterfeit version of these 144,000. Right? They're going to impose the mark, while these ones reject the mark. These ones are redeemed from the earth. And this is the opposite of or was it over here? Over here in Revelation 7, where these are the kindreds of the whole earth, the nations and the people and tongues. They're separated from these 144,000. These are the same ones that we see here as what the waters represent are the peoples, multitudes, and nations and tongues. It's the Gentile world. So we can see that the 144,000, the Jews, come from the earth. And that's where we see a separation. In the physical world, we have Jews and Gentiles. The Jews represent men and women. The Gentiles represent animals and beasts. Right? The Jews, the true Jews, are RH negative. The Gentiles are RH positive. But then you have a mix, but they are still considered RH positive, even though they're half Jew. And you may be half Jew and not even realize it. It has to do with the blood type. But anyway, that about sums it up. Just showing you how that is. Now, spiritually, when you accept Jesus, the blood type doesn't matter. It doesn't. You're part of the body of Jesus, who is a Jew. You're one flesh with him. It doesn't matter anymore. You're considered dead, and you got a new life with Jesus. So the blood don't matter. But time of grace is going to be lifted, and the church is going to be raptured. And at that time, that's when these kind of things actually matter again. Well, you're a Jew. You convert to Judaism, or you're lost. And I don't mean the nation of Israel, and I don't mean the Jewish leadership. I mean these 144,000 who are refusing the mark, and the two witnesses who are witnessing. And they're probably doing some crazy miracles and things. But they're going against the state and the religious leadership, just like Jesus did, just like the prophets of old. Those are the ones you got to be following and supporting. But yeah, that about sums it up. I'm just kind of delaying and rambling a little bit to see if there's anything else on my mind that I wanted to put out here, but nothing really coming to me. If anything else, I'll either make a second video or put in the info box or something. But with that being said, thanks for watching and take care.